Can you, you can barely see it, but I have a better map. I don't know. It's just like I'm looking at some of the things that are happening. My main concern, was what happened in World War II. What happened with Poland and in the Winter War. Like in the Winter War, like what did the Russians lose? 120,000 dead, not like casualties, like dead in 108 days of war. So it's like these numbers are horrendous, I mean, and it's just like you tell the population nothing's going wrong, so they enlist or whatever, right? Well, whatever the case, it was a lot of losses, whatever. And we're saying 10,000 is a lot, 20,000, whatever it goes up to, and in a short duration that we're like mentally, psychologically, accustomed to of what kind of losses we have. But they happened before when the population in Russia was less. So, like, that'll be my concern. If Russia mobilizes, um, I think they fielded an army between 3 to 7 million during World War II, and they had casualties around 5 million. So it stands to reason they had an army of around like 12 million in whatever 15 million was, you can even say it size that. Well, around 12 million, right? Because they had 5 million casualties and it fluctuated between 3 and 7 million. Rough estimates, ballpark figures. I don't want to get like false accuracy or whatever, but specifically, it doesn't matter. It's a lot of people. I'm going to assume it's around each million was about 1% of the population. So about 10% of the population, 12% of the population, 5% of the population dead. And they had 50 million throughout the whole war, or 20 something million Russians died, civilians, something like that, give or take. Anyways, a lot of people in the tens of millions. Okay, so you want to Google army size of Russia in World War II. And I guess follow along with me. And we'll just probably Wikipedia. If you see my tabs, they're definitely not financial advice, so be careful. All right, just text me. I'll tell you the real information or how the good information about it. Stick to blockchains. Other stuff is just. I have a couple good ones: Phantom, Polygon, Solana, and business card stuff. So, anyways, I'm like complete open book. Like very transparent. Anyways, just ask. Um, like I said, I used to be very eclectic. I want to get back to that where I could take and support, being native, I could definitely, for civil rights, Latino, Black, or whatever, furthering civil rights. And as long as you get back to Native American causes, socially, politically, I'm not saying I spend anything, but I'm there. And I'll take some hits. You take some of my hits. Anyways, size of Soviet Union. Oh, that's the AIM flag, by the way. American Indian Movement flag. Okay, we have a charty. Chart. Military deaths, so it doesn't really say, civilian versus military. I mean, well, yeah, it says military, right? So 11 allies, 10 million. I guess I'll be stand corrected. I was given to take it was 10. I was brought up with 10. I mean, with 5 million. So 10 million deaths per year. Well, an interesting number is this Poland number right here. 160,000 dead. And like I said, I mean, there's numbers that I'm pulling off the top of my head that obviously there's so many redactions I have to make in all these videos. I can't get back to all of them. You have to do your own research, right? As they say on the internet, do your own research. But 160,000 Polish military Polish people died. I think they inflicted on the Germans in what, 3 weeks of battle, 4 weeks of battle, in about a month. We'll say under, you give or take, doesn't matter, in a short period of time. Yeah, because then you get all technical in hours and days or whatever. But I think it was 3 weeks of battle, almost positive. Point being, on the Germans, on the Nazis, they inflicted around 30,000, if whatever gets updated, maybe 40,000 deaths onto the Germans in 3 weeks. And then the Russians joined in at the very, very end. And I think that was another 20,000. So let's conservatively say between 40 and 75,000 deaths the Polish people inflicted in a very short period of time, in under a month, around a month. So that's crazy amount of people that died. So these numbers are not unheard of, And to the Russians, that was a victory. To the Germans, that was a victory. It was like nothing to them. So that's my concern, is when a country fully mobilizes, it becomes a fascist state. Turns that corner to be fully mobilizing, geared for one thing, for war, fascism, right? And where you're very autocratic, beyond just autocratic, you're Nazi, you're like, everything is just trying to be this logistics bureaucratic nightmare that tries to legitimize, racism and everything like that. Whatever you want to term, a fascist state, you could get all into the particulars, and I don't want to use, big ass words and shit like that, and so that could be argued, that word is wrong, so therefore everything he says is wrong. That's not my point. My point is, when a country decides to field this size of a big ass army and mobilize this amount of population, is my concern, because I see that happening, and even if Ukraine is beating them on, actually this is what's happening now, is beating them on the battlefield, but they're slowly grinding them, just throwing people, and they're using the Ukrainians basically as a firing squad. And tell you the truth, they already know that it's not going to really matter, because the Ukrainians, effectiveness is increasing, I'm talking about. So faster than the Russians. But if you're outnumbered 10 to 1, it starts to wear them down. And normally it would, that would be able to be a country, like it did in Poland, and it was gradually happened to Finland. But we're resupplying them at a rate that it doesn't matter because their military equipment is going down. And Ukrainians are stealing so much shit. It's going up. It's crazy. They're like fucking, they're just like hooking up tractors and shit like that. Stealing it away. Stuff like that will last you a lifetime. What did you steal? Some chips and candy and makeup or whatever the fuck you got. I got a fucking tank. You know what I'm saying? Some crazy ass shit. And it's for your defense of your country too. So, anyways, their equipment's going up, and we're resupplying it, and it is a logistical thing. We can't get off of that, and that's my another concern, is that the less country there is, the less resupply it, and it gets cut off, and we can't resupply shit that's get caught off, even though there's heavy resistance there. You look at this map, well, Chrome. Okay, it's updating. Updating. So we got Ukraine. By the way, Ukraine is in Europe, for those that don't know. It's making sure. It's like somebody would be like, oh no, well, that whole additive, they don't even know where Vietnam is or Afghanistan is, the beginning of the war. But I'm pretty sure we all know where Ukraine is, next to Poland, between Russia. But anyways, here we go. My main concern is that the less of a country, the less to resupply it. It's like, say you have like a pocket up in here. Now you can't resupply. If you could see my hand, you can't really supply in here really good. So in fact, if it's like a whole army unit or military effective force being cut off, and that's another concern. Like in this pocket down in here where I'm clicking, and they could link up over here. So if I could take a screenshot of this real quick. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this. Draw some arrows and stuff, right? Then we just go to window capture. Increase that, get a little bit more screen, and more pleasant to the eye, right? Okay, there we go. So this amoeba shape, mnemonic, whatever this, this, whatever term you want to call it, is really beneficial to the Ukrainians because they have to defend along that whole front. So their troops are all spread out, so to speak, give or take. It's not exactly like that, but for a lot of the area's intensive purposes, it is. Instead of like, if you take this distance right here, oops, now it'd be a straight consolidated line, and they could focus everything. So the more spread out it is, the better. So, like with not Caesar, but at Alexander the Great's companion cavalry, creating divides and making separate fights is better. You know what I'm talking about? Because in detail you could focus an attack over here or your defense over here and over there. And with like the Star Fort mentality, the engineering type of mind, if you know what I mean, that you're creating more surface area on the Star Fort and overlapping fire and everything like that. So when they assault, they're coming at you in a line, but you have so much men that you could line across that star, that angle right there, that angle right there, and the next angle. So not only is there more people than that one line could do, you have overlapping fire. Same thing with that, the sawtooth, of legionaries, which is arguably, they say, did not take place, but in certain instances it did. But it's definitely, they had that, the wedge is the same type of thing when they used at the Battle of Watling Street against Boudica. They say it was a sawtooth, but it was definitely some they used the wedge definitely. And so when Boudica came down, screaming down in I wouldn't say a line, but sort of like that, en masse like that, they hit one person would come against like three people. That was like the ratio when they were like that, the defensive, wedge, whatever. It's be a little like this, right? If you have all these people lined up in a wedge and angle, and that person's coming down, person get him from the side, person get him dead on, and from over there, and boom, your sword is retracted, and then someone jar him, move him a little bit over, and that's basically what happened on Mass. And they just walked it up, on Wanley Hill. When they, if you saw Rome, they fight at the front for a few minutes, whatever, and they pushed up, and they constantly do that. I'm on the mindset they had a sawtooth, but I'm an outlier. But I'll adhere to the consensus that it's a wedge, and it's still the same concept or whatever, because you could hold a wedge, more disciplined, especially in chaos of battle, more uniformly. But it's the same concept. You're putting more men than a single line. But even if they do consolidate, you want to use both these things to your advantage, because now once they're consolidated, you can consolidate your defense. So you got to always have that mentality. Whatever happens, you use your advantage, right? And so now all this area in here, you want to make sure is well supplied and shit like that. So they're being partisans or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that you already have to have them supplied before that happens. You know what I mean? So, but once it's occupied, it's hard to resupply them. And that's my main concern. As more of the country is slowly occupied and they're gradually moving up, it's a less of a country that you can logistically support. And so what happens when you just have that amount of country and no maneuverability? It's just, what are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? So you want to fight for every inch, you know what I'm saying? So you have that movement. But I'm obviously going to fight for every inch, but it's imperative that some of these areas are held, that you have that movement. And that area, for me, Is it Dnep River? Dnep River. Horrible pronouncing. So that needs to be held at all costs. So you at least have half the country. And from there, you could launch your other major assaults. Because you need that to rebuild military equipment, repair, train, and everything else. So, and I know it could hold. But the thing is, like, you see them start coming up over here, right? But even over here, as they come up, like all this needs to be fortified. So you could attack back down it just in case, along that river. And same thing over here. And that's what they're already doing, but so I definitely think this area could. They're already starting to retake this area, and they said they could definitely take it, and I agree with that. With the Ukrainians saying, I think it's very important for them to retake it, take that line, because once they're on the other side of the river, they just flood right over the river, right? So Kherson needs to be retaken and held. And so once they take it back, like a lot of uh, whatever it needs to fortify it needs to be done. Like I said, um, I'm pretty sure like other people see that. I mean, it was from the very beginning, the Dnep River, and then the whole like the um, everything that goes into the other half of Ukraine needs to be held, and they thought they were going to push to the river. I think it still holds true. I mean, it's just kind of like it's always been the case. Like even in World War II, as the Russians were advancing, the Nazis held or wanted to hold the Dnep River for as long as possible. So it's been used as, a defensive line before. And probably historically, even before that, right? Whereas it was kind of not as populated was as it is now. So it's a little bit different. If you go back to like the Mongols and the Kevin Roos and everything else like that. So the dynamics are different. Um, there's infrastructure and everything else like that. But it's still a defensive hold because if you want to look where the bottlenecks are. So, and they're pushing back. Like I see a lot of things on TV and I agree. Like I'm saying, I'm just adding what I already, my opinions on top of, the consensus that's already there. So it shouldn't veer off too much of what's already being said. And if it does, make sure you attend to that, but like, oh, he's off on that. But Kherson being held is very important. Everybody's talking about giving them enough weapons, but you gotta understand, like, they don't want to also, escalate. So that's my whole concern. Like, what weapons can you give them without escalation or expanding it? Because I want to say, like, as the Russian Georgian troops come out, Georgia could, prepare for a counterattack to regain their uh, national sovereignty or whatever, but that's expanding it. So I would definitely prepare that as contingency, but, it's just like that's expanding it. And same thing with Moldavia, go in to reclaim their territory. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, and if you give them modern jets, our current thinking and modern tanks is that's escalation. And from what I understand, what's happening now, anything that's a Cold War era weapons that's still effective now, that's fine because they're using Cold War jets and technology. The MiGs they use are already like a quarter of a century old, so might as well use quarter of a century, defensive equipment. And if it has anti in front of it, it's fine. So, but the most of these battles are taking place are person on person, anti personnel type battles. So, I mean, taking out equipment relatively quickly. That's my point. My point is they're taking out equipment relatively quickly, so the javelins are, very effective and everything. But beyond that, and I would just say it's not just that, because you're just like, oh, it's just that. No, my point is that a lot of these things pushing beyond just vehicles and tanks and everything is person on person, and that flooded people, and that's why I initially stated millions of man army, and to be over flooded with that. So if you take out equipment, that's really good. So let me build a foundation of where I'm getting my argument at. So you're destroying equipment faster than they can produce it, and we already cut off the resources and economy of that. So we already do those things that destroy the equipment. All right, so that's the foundation of the argument. Now to the next part of what I'm trying to say about a lot of these things are person on person. So it's not like I'm just saying, well, just handle this and you're fine. But do all these other things, right? Taking out helicopters and the planes and everything. Building up an air force as fast as possible, but still removing infantry off the ground, even if you have air superiority, is always going to be the hardest. And getting back to, now I just started with what I was saying, person on person, a lot of these things pushing forward and back and regaining is person on person, anti-personnel type of weapons and capabilities. Now that you understand what I'm saying, is I don't want to say just ignore everything else, but that needs to, you can increase that, because if you're flooded, you wanted it flood with more people across the border into the Russian army. You need to be able to handle that. And I think effective military capability is really what you want to get at, because right now you still have some aspects of using artillery, but it could be better. Russians are not utilizing, they're just destroying leveling very systematically, and so you want to have counter battery capability, so as soon as they fire, you know exactly where they're at and you could counter battery it. And I think that's where we could get without escalation, without expanding the war and giving them like some kind of crazy, totally U.S. NATO, derived weaponry where we're directly helping them, but having that ability to have counter battery really quickly would be it would make them even more effective. So that's what I'm getting at. I mean, have everything zeroed in, of course, their avenue approaches, and all that other stuff, make sure every road is, you test fire and, okay, we know that round's going to hit there. And so if they come, we got that. But even just to keep their heads down, as you're advancing, then you could walk those rounds back into them. So you're attacking and the infantry's pushing them forward, and you already know where their artillery is going to hit. So you just walk it back into the enemy. And that can happen in real time, because you're attacking, you see, oh, well, our mortars are falling right behind them, right? You see, adjust your fire closer to them, so they try to retreat into them, and then that keeps their heads down so you could advance, right? And so that radar technology, and it's really probably communication and the radar talking together with every other radar effectively, where you could pinpoint where it's coming from very quickly. Radar talking to each other, you know. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you have the radar and the round goes up, hits the radar, exact word. You know, because you see how the radar, you know, makes a scan or whatever, and it can only hit a certain elevation, right? And so it enters that elevation, and then round hits the apex, and then it comes back down. So you have those 3 points, and so almost instantaneously, you know where the artillery came from, and that information needs to go directly to the counter battery. And that is just basically good communication. And with that, you have your radar detect rounds, and then you could have it also detect these hypersonic missiles, because in reality, we're, you know, freaking out about it, but we have the capability to take them out, because it's more of a fact that they're moving so quickly, we have less time to actually be notified to have any counter deterrence on it. And it's only moving at a rate that's, you know, a couple times what we're normally used to. And our missiles can hit it down. It's just getting them, you know, up in time. You have a few minutes. They already have to be at the ready and whatever. So our detection system is probably more of something we should be concerned about than being able to having it more accurate. We're already accurate. If it's already moving, we're already hitting like a speeding bullet with a speeding bullet, right? I mean, you could adjust it and make it better, but it's only a couple times, you know, faster than, you know, the speed of sound. And if you look at it, you know, when you have an anti-missile missile, the blast radius, whatever, it's already hitting it dead on. And so if it's just slightly off, the shrapnel's still going to hit it. You know what I'm talking about? So the killing radius of the missile is still within the area of margin of error. You know what I mean? If not, it could hit it dead on. I mean, if it's moving like 100 times the speed of sound, then I'll be concerned. But just a couple, it's not. It's just more of we just have to probably calibrate our missiles better, you know, and our detection service. So, and we get our own hypersonic missiles, obviously, you know. But yeah, you know, that's just my personal feeling. So go back up on the map or whatever. But you know, I guess I want to talk about over here, and this is really where I'll have a lot of pushback because it'd be inaccurate. But once you take back something, make sure you refortify it and make sure, you know, that you just don't take it back. They have a whole nother like contingent element that knows to, as you're pushing forward, they're already refortifying everything. But I think you have to get ready for them to all the gains you made on the counter assaults. Russia's going to play all their hands and just start throwing conscripts. I mean, historically, they don't give a fuck. You know, like you already see the reports. They don't care about their deaths. You know what I'm talking about? And even Zelensky was just like, well, it's just. You know, they're just walking into their own deaths. It's like they're eliminating and purging, culling their population and conscripting the people and just throwing them out there. And that happens a lot of times in empires, you know. Why China collapsed, you know, they had their shit straight. They made a really good empire, all the administration and bureaucracy of making an empire and how to make rice and crops and everything. And they just grew in population. And then it got so corrupted that population went after the government, and then the population just collapsed. One way to reduce the population was use the population as an expendable resource and use it as an attacking force to gain more, gain the wealth of your neighbor and land of your neighbor so it could expand. And so sort of you see that happening now. Your population's increasing, and then population that's not contributing, you can script it, and it's just another. If they die, that's fine. If they die gaining more territory, good. I'm talking about, because then you get more territory to sustain the part of the population that's contributing, and you see that happening. That's just historically what it is, and we're just not used to these concepts, But my point is that having this population is an expendable resource, and having it 3 times the population of Ukraine, it depends with which one mobilizes quicker, and Ukraine is obviously doing it quicker. I mean, if you have 1/3 of the fighting force in Ukraine versus 10% of Russia, you'll be all right. I'm saying it's an equal numberly, it'll be equal about, I'm talking about. But now you're resupplying it also, and they can't resupply with complex military equipment. So they're just keeping fed into this meat grinder, right? And these are just like conservative, rounded ballpark figure numbers. Don't like ever take this as some sort of like range, or even a range or ratio of numbers, specific numbers that is going to determine the outcome or anything like that. It's just, this is not, you got to look at history, but realize with information